Welcome back YouTubers, Adzi here, and I have a Nuprol Delta Freedom Fighter here on the bench. Now this has got a classic Nuprol problem, which I'm about to show you in just a second. So if you've got a Nuprol yourself, then this you may find extremely useful. Here is the gun. Now the problem that we're experiencing with this is that when we pull the semi-trigger, so as you can see, it doesn't shoot on every shot, which is really annoying if you're in a game because your enemy's coming up and your gun is not firing. So it doesn't shoot every shot, so it's really inconsistent. Now, there is a super simple fix for this, and I'm going to show you what it is. So I'm going to take this apart, I'm going to show you what is causing the problem, and then I'm going to show you what I do to resolve it. So here we are in the gearbox. Obviously I've cut out all of the stripping it down because hopefully those of you that are watching this that are hoping to fix your own gun have got some idea of taking a gun apart. So this is the offending bit in here. So what is supposed to happen is as the trigger is pulled, this is going to push this like so, which activates the trigger in here, causing the gun to cycle. Now the problem that starts to happen, now I don't know how easy this is going to be able to replicate like this, but as this comes forward, everything wears slightly, and because that's rounded, and that bit in there starts to wear, what it does, it jumps up and over exactly like that before it clicked the trigger, which means on that pull, it didn't work. You see that? Rather than when I hold it, it should push in like that. It's because it's worn. So we're going to do some modifications to this bit, this little bit here, to make that more effectively pushed by this trigger. See, it worked then and then didn't work the second time. See, not then, not then, not then, not then, and it did then. So yeah, we're going to make some changes to this, which means we're going to pull, let's get rid of all this trigger real quick. I'm going to break it. There we go. Now, so we're going to take this out completely. And we're going to open this up. Okay, so we're going to open this. But when you do it, be careful because there is lots of little separate parts in here that you probably don't want springing everywhere before you at least had half a chance to look at where they go. So we're in. That is what our trigger set looks like. So what we're going to do is a couple of things to ensure that this is going to work better. So obviously we mentioned a minute ago that that curve is going to be the problem. So what we're going to do is two things. We're going to flatten that slightly, but not all of it. We still want some rounded top, but we want a slightly flatter edge for the trigger to engage on. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to glue the thinnest bit of plastic to the underneath of this little trigger part. So this bit here, because what that's going to do is that is going to shim that upwards just a fraction of a millimetre, and that's going to give us more contact with the trigger coming forward, making a more reliable push from the trigger on the button. So without moving the rest of it, you should be able to pull that bit out. Yeah, so we've got that. Now the next thing we're going to do, flatten the front very slightly, stick that bit of plastic on the bottom there. So a bit of sandpaper, only something fine because we don't want to scratch it to pieces. We only want a nice smooth flat edge. And as I say, don't completely flatten it because you don't want to make it too short that the trigger can't push it. Can you see that? Is it going to focus properly? So literally I've only sanded it flat, the fractionest of bits. It's just to give it a more of a connection with the trigger. So that's that. Next bit, we're going to glue some plastic on the underneath of it. So here we are. Here's the little plastic bit that we're going to fix it with. So you probably can't see it because it's a little clear piece of plastic. Now, it's only a cutout from a bit of packaging that some of the airsoft parts and stuff come in. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick that under there, because all that does is shim it very, very slightly upwards. Now, the bit of plastic you're going to use, make sure it's nice and smooth, because obviously this is a moving part. We don't want to put anything on there that's going to restrict its movement. So nice and smooth so that it slides easy. So all we're going to do, get the smallest amount of super glue on the bottom of that, like so, and then literally stick that to it, hopefully without sticking my fingers together. So once we finish that, this bit is going to look like that on the top. So it's a little flat bit, so I don't know if you can see that. Let's give you a side profile. It's going to look smooth, it's going to flat on the top. And then the bit of plastic we've stuck under there is nice and smooth. So that's fine. So what we then got to do, make sure we put it back in the correct way around. So that means bring your trigger back over without all the other bits falling out, because that's a nightmare. We're going to put that back in there like so. So that's fine. Now that will still push quite happily. I won't do it too much because all this is going to spring out, but that's fine. So we've got a flatter front, slightly shimmed up, so that's holding that ever so slightly higher. Let's get the other side of that clipped back on before we lose everything. Okay, so that's all back together with the two bits that we've done to it. You should be able to hear it clicking, just to ensure that you've done it right. So provided you can hear a nice healthy click, you know you haven't tampered with anything that you shouldn't have done in there, and the trigger should still be working. So let's put it back in the gun and see if it now shoots properly. Here it is then, back in its gearbox. Now, I've done a bit of a service on the rest of it, so we've done some shimming, we've made sure all this is all nice and air seals good, etc. So everything's all ready to go back together. Anti-reverse lever, mustn't forget to put that in. Do that in a minute. Just before we close it all up, let's just have a little look what happens when we pull the trigger. So that, quite happily, and hopefully the camera will pick up the clicking. So that's all good in there. So let's get everything back in that shell. Let's get the other half of the shell on, get the spring in it, put it back in the receiver, put it back in the rest of the gun, and see if that has resolved the trigger issue. So that's all back together now. So we've serviced the whole gun, but more importantly, we've had a go at fixing that trigger contacts. So we've seen the couple of modifications we've done, and that should be stopping the little bit that the Nuprol guns have that pushes the little trigger button. It should stop that jumping up and disengaging the trigger prematurely before the thing's actually cycled. So now, when we put it into semi, we have got a gun that shoots every single time when you pull the trigger. So a couple of simple modifications and have fixed that dreaded Nuprol problem that they seem to all have, or all the ones I seem to see have, but then I suppose I only see them because they're broken. But yeah, that I see all too often. Nice simple fix. So I hope that's been really useful and that you've enjoyed the video. Hope you've learned something, and I hope you've managed to fix yours if you've been having the same issue. In the meantime though, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.